Everybody welcome to our webinar today. I'm just going to share my screen. And can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. I just needed confirmation. So today we're going to be talking about research, what I like to call research phobia, and ways to get yourself going with your own research. So my name is Petra Brysiewicz, and I'm a professor of nursing at the University of KwaZulu-Natal in Durban, South Africa. And I'm also very involved in AFEM and specifically in AFEM Nursing. So moving on, I've just put this here because in my dealings with nurses across the continent, usually when I start talking to nurses about research, this is the kind of face that often faces me, because people say they don't like research. Research is too difficult. Why must I do research? And so that's why we thought we'd talk about it today. Perhaps also just to say, as we go along, please feel free to put questions in the chat, or you're welcome to keep them to ask at the end. I'll just make sure that we have some time to answer any questions. So if we look at why nurses should be doing research, I'm sure those of you who are on this call are already well aware of why. Previously, doctors really dominated healthcare research. And we know that nursing has a completely different perspective. We're at the forefront of delivering care to patients. We are the people who are with the patients for 24 hours and have a key role in identifying and improving the quality of care and the quality of life of our patients. And we need a nursing model of care that focuses on providing support for people living with often chronic conditions, because we know that that's a large proportion of population, but also our patients for us in terms of emergency, also injury, etc. related. So why is research important in nursing? It helps to build networking skills and relationships with your other healthcare providers, patients, and families. It increases the confidence and shared knowledge within the research, within a medical team, so that you're all sort of talking the same language. And it promotes, I believe, job satisfaction. There are obviously a lot of challenges to consider in terms of building capacity for nursing research and evidence-based practice. I'm just sharing this slide with you. This is some work that I was doing together with colleagues in the United Kingdom. And just to say that the problems that we have in terms of encouraging nurses, and specifically nurses at the bedside, clinical nurses, to do research is not unique to us in Africa. It's the same all over the world. Believe it or not, in high-income countries, they're often complaining of lack of funding, inconsistent leadership support, lack of knowledge. The nurses do not have sufficient knowledge in order to do research, and insufficient organizational value for research. So your job is asking you, well, why do you want to do research? They don't value the research that's being done. I would say it's also really important for us to be looking at research as nurses, because as it says here, data never sleeps. So much new knowledge is being generated every single minute of every day that we really have to be proactive in making sure that we keep up to date. We also have the fifth industrial revolution in terms of all this new technology, AI tools, ChatGPT, etc. And we need to be able to keep at the forefront of that. So I believe that one of the ways we can try to motivate nurses to participate in research is that we need to make it visible. And what I mean is we need to show the practical application of research so that nurses, and especially nurses at the bedside, can actually see its concrete value to nursing. How does it actually help you as a practicing nurse, perhaps being able to then provide better care for your patients' families and ultimately improving the healthcare system? So my sort of suggestion would be that it is around making sure that we provide and we do research that is able to show this. So these are just some examples that I can share with you. This one particular is they developed a protocol to guide prenatal care of women. This one over here is around how you manage families of critically ill patients. So it's often is around the research that we are doing. And oftentimes, if you look in the history of a lot of our nursing research in Africa, we are often doing, nurses are doing research on nurses. We need to try and move away from that and make sure we are doing research on our patients, on our families, on the healthcare system. We also need to perhaps do research that is useful for the nurses in the clinical practice in terms of assisting them in the work that they are doing within their role as a nurse. So here is an example from colleagues in Cape Town in South Africa who, in educating nurses to be children's nurses in Africa, they realized that there really is a large barrier in terms of trying to access literature and then trying to read literature and understand its application for clinical practice. So really thinking about how to translate research into practice. So they developed a new style of journal club. And in this, what they sort of developed is that within the practical environment, so whether it's an award or a clinic, the manager selects a topic that's very relevant for the nurses. There's a facilitator that carefully selects a particular journal article to be able to review. The facilitator develops a series of questions that will then be used as prompts to help the nurses who are attending the journal group to question the paper. And then there's group facilitation. And an interesting part of this is that all the information is conveyed through the use of graphics. So they draw pictures and they convey a lot of the scientific data through pictures, purely because a lot of the nurses that they're working with in the clinical areas are not used to a lot of these big, long research terms. And so if you condense it down, perhaps make it into a diagram, etc., it's conveying all the same information, but just in a way that's much easier to understand and much quicker to understand. So they've done some research around how these nurses found this new way of doing it. And it really increased their access to the literature. They really enjoyed it, especially this visual graphic record. And what they found was that there was a lot of active participation. Myself, I'm also established a collaboration with some colleagues in the US, where we are looking to introduce concepts around the use of clinical data. So how people in clinical practice can use the data that they have available, whether it be in patient records or in registers or whatever, in order to answer very important research questions for that area. We know that our medical records have huge amounts of data for us to use, but so often we are just collecting the information and not using it ourselves. And we can be using this kind of information to be able to ask questions around various clinical issues in that particular area, or questions around how can we best then inform change in our practice. So these are just some examples of research that's been done using a register that's been collected in a trauma department. So in this particular collaboration, what we do is we take Doctor of Nursing practice students from the US. They come to South Africa and work together with us to help identify potential quality improvement initiatives, which then students from South Africa can then initiate quality improvement projects. So it's also about the high income and the lower income countries working together to be able to attempt to address nursing practice issues. And I've just put this up here because I think it's important for us to think about, there really are two different types of scholars. We are all very aware of the research scholar, which is those of you who maybe went out and done your PhD, like myself. A PhD is about generating knowledge, and you were a research scholar. But there is also something called a clinical scholar, and that's more about knowledge application. And for the researchers in the clinical area, this is exactly where they sit, and it's very important research that needs to be done. So I would just also mention that in terms of developing research, it's very important to just talk about being a role model and a mentor, because for a lot of us all, you know, that's what we need as we get started. And the role, I believe, of a mentor or a role model is to attempt to remove obstacles from the path of the novice. And one of the ways, which I think is a very useful thing to do, is to, as the expert, to show people that it's very real to have all these failures. This is someone that I was just following on Twitter. And what he was saying is he is a very well-established researcher. And he was saying he likes to put all of his reject messages on his door, so that when more junior people come to see him, then they understand that in your role as a researcher, people reject your work many, 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 many times. They reject your articles, they reject your research grants. There's all sorts of things. It doesn't mean that just because you become a more senior person that nobody rejects you. And myself, definitely, I've been rejected gazillions of times and continue to be rejected. But it's important to show this real face. Otherwise, junior researchers get so disheartened after their first rejection that they decide research is not for them. And that really isn't the case. We need to also ensure that we have research champions. So those, hopefully, of you that are on the call are then nurses that can go out there and champion the importance of doing research in the clinical area, and really bridging this gap between research and practice. I wanted to just touch on a project that I'm been very privileged to lead. It was the name of the program is Developing Research, Innovation, Localization, and Leadership in South Africa. And the aim of this was to produce high quality scientists who skilled to lead research. And these involved nurses, but it wasn't only nurses. They were all different categories of healthcare workers. And just to acknowledge my colleagues who work on this with me. Within this program, the idea was to train researchers to hopefully retain them as scientists, and to do this through mentorship, supervision, etc. So we had a number of, whether they were PhD or postdocs, in a variety of different areas, mental health, HIV, etc. And what really was valuable for these researchers is around having mentorship, having a flexible training program, be it around writing articles or grant writing, communication, whatever. Also looking at personal development, because it's very important to be able to manage your stress and burnout, as well as developing yourself professionally. Also aspects of social accountability, so that the research that we're actually doing is applicable to our local area and our local communities. And then developing communities of practice. So developing a group of people around you that then are all researching and working in the same area to really try to increase the impact. So I think the other aspect is we need to really demystify research. I think for a lot of people, research just has all these very big, complicated words, and everybody gets scared at the mere thought of starting on such a project. So I have put together what I like to call the START model, and I'll just take you through it. So my advice would be that you need to start simple. So have a focused topic. And if you're starting on research for the first time, or maybe this is just your second project, just have a simple basic design, something to get you going so that you can practice doing your research. And the next time you do your research, you can make it a little bit more complicated. But if you start small, at least you plan to finish. Very often when I talk to nurses, they've never done research before, and they're starting off with a very complicated project that they then find is way too difficult to do, and it makes them lose confidence and enthusiasm. I would also say that you need to be open to opportunities. Sometimes there are people saying, we would like someone to be involved in a study, anybody interested? Always be willing, go and have a listen, and then see if it's something that's appropriate for you or not. I wanted to just put this in here that, you know, developing a routine habit or developing expertise takes time. You can't just do one or two and then decide that you're going to be an expert. So they've done all sorts of research around how long they think it takes. To become an expert takes 10,000 hours, apparently. So you have to do something regularly for it to become a habit. So for research to start feeling more familiar, you've got to do a number of studies and do them regularly. I believe you need to have a target. So what do you hope to achieve? Are you writing an article? Is it a presentation? Is it something you want to feed back to your hospital? Be clear about what it is, and then tell people so that they can keep you accountable. Think about your audience. So who is this information for? And make sure that you get the information, the results out. Very often, especially with people doing research for qualifications, the only people that maybe get to know about their research are their family members, because they give them copies of their master's or their PhD, and then nobody else ever gets to see the results because they don't publish it. And this is just to remind you that science is not finished until it's communicated. It's something I tell my students all the time. The next thing is you need to arrange your team. If you've never done research before, you need to find a mentor or an expert to guide you in the process. Otherwise, it's just the blind leading the blind, and then you make it very hard for yourself. It's really good to have research champions to lead the team, because you need somebody who's passionate and enthusiastic to really inspire others, so that when things are perhaps not going so well, or it's a little bit more difficult than what people thought, they are the ones that say, don't worry, keep going, it'll be all right. It's also very important to collaborate with others. It helps to share the tasks, and it also makes your research better. You need to consider the relevance. So how relevant is the research that you're going to do? I know we all like to do research on things that we like, but we must also take time to pause and really think about whether what we are doing our research on is of value to clinical practice, or are we just doing research for the sake of research? So why does the study matter? And think about the social accountability aspect. So what is the impact to society? And the impact doesn't have to be huge, but really need to think about this. And when this slide is here just to show you that as you are starting your research, it's important to think about your impact right from the beginning, and be saying to yourself, how am I going to disseminate this information? So how am I going to spread this information? Am I going to go to the hospital and give them feedback? Am I presenting at a meeting somewhere? Am I going to publish it as an article? Have a plan. And I would say be innovative and be creative and think out of the box. It doesn't have to be all the same things that everybody else has been doing. So nurses have a rich tradition of being, they say, the hackers of the hospital. We are very good at working creatively to solve a problem. There's a problem in the clinical areas, nurses will always find a way, whether it's with equipment or patients, etc. And COVID-19 really showed us this from various examples across the world. This is one of my favorite. It's from the nurses in Brazil. They called it the hand of God. And this is what they devised for patients who were being intubated, ventilated, and they couldn't have their families there. So it was a hand to make them feel not so alone. There's numerous innovative things that all of these nurses came up with. And we also have our very own innovative nurse who's also on this call. I would encourage you to look at things from a different perspective. So like I said, don't just repeat what research you saw before. Really have a look and think about what you think would be useful to do. It's important to establish reasonable timelines so that, you don't want to start a project that, unless it's your PhD, but a regular project in the clinical area that you think is going to take you 3 years, 4 years, 5 years to do. You're never going to keep up the enthusiasm, or it's very unlikely that you will keep up the enthusiasm for that long. Make them shorter kind of time spans and work towards a clearly defined goal. And within your team, make sure everybody's aware of what the timelines are and keep working towards those. So my advice, and I see there's some questions, hopefully those are questions in the chat, so I'm looking forward to seeing what they are. But my advice for nurses wanting to do research, it's about time management, patience often, and perseverance. Things are not always going to be easy, and there will be some difficulties and challenges. But definitely if you are a nurse from the AFEM nurses group, there are plenty of people around to provide some guidance and assistance if you do run into problems. I would say please keep on the work towards improving your research. For all of us, as we do more research, we hopefully get slightly better. We learn how to do things better. So it's something that you have to just keep working at. Have a genuine interest in the topic that you're researching. I was just saying yesterday, there's nothing more difficult as a supervisor if you are supervising someone who's doing research in an area that they hate or that they're not interested in. So choose a topic that interests you. Be sure to balance your professional and personal life. You are not just nurses working in an emergency department. You are also mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, whatever. And you need to balance that. And when you are looking to join up with other people to work together in a research team, one of my mentors has had very important advice for me, which I've always stuck to. And he said, it should be fun. So make sure you're working with people that you want to work with and that you're going to have fun working together with. So in closing, I would just advise that you learn from a frog. So maybe some of you are aware the foam nest frog needs its tadpoles to drop down into water to survive and then grow to become a frog. So you need to think about where you're going to put your nest. So you need to think about how you set yourself up in order to do research. So are you perhaps setting yourself up to fail, like this poor little frog here? They built their nest right above a busy road, and it was a very small puddle that has almost disappeared. Or are you like this frog, built their nests right above a nice big puddle? And so are you setting yourself up for success? You have to understand that the road may be blocked by obstacles, and it will be, and probably on many occasions. And once you get past one obstacle, there might well be others waiting for you around the corner. And remember the iceberg illusion. It always looks like it was much easier for everybody else, and that's not the case. Remember all the things that you can't see. People tell me all the time, oh, it was very easy for you. And I would say, no, all these things underneath here, those were all happening to me and continue to. So my words to you all are to be brave. And my question is, are you ready to conquer your research phobia if you do have it? So in conclusion, what are you focusing your research on, and what is going to be your contribution? Who are you working with, and how are you interacting with your audience, and how are you getting your message out, your message from your research? And my concluding wish for you all is that this journey today, this presentation today, has provided some points for you to ponder, and hopefully as well some inspiration that will help you to continue in your quest to further develop yourself as a researcher. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Petra. Wonderful presentation.
Thanks, Emmanuel. Shall we look in are there questions in the chat?
Chat box.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't see any. I'm not sure that you can see any.
Okay, let's see.
Right.
It's nice to see where everybody's from. Thank you for putting your things in. Are there questions? I see a hand is up. Trying to see on my, okay. Would you like to go ahead? Yeah.
Yeah, hello. Petra, that was a very wonderful presentation, I must say. Not a question, but kind of contribution just to encourage others who are on this platform. You rightly made mention of the phobia with research when it comes to nurses. And 2-3 years back, I couldn't even save my life when research was mentioned in a room. But just as you said, you have to be brave. Very simple things which I have learned on my journey in research is doing the very fun stuff. So from home, I used to hold a lot of, let's say, house parties, but I never thought that even I could do a simple feedback with a QR code just to see what people liked and what people didn't like. And I think that just something simple like that opened my eye to how you could pick just 5 people's feedback and then be able to talk about what you have found out. We can take this practice into the clinical environment, such as if you're a manager and you think that a very good number of your staff come to work late, you just need to create a very simple 2-3 questionnaire just to ask why people are coming to work late. And you can present, just as you are saying, in a ward meeting. It's a form of research to let them understand these are what they have said anonymously are the challenges, and you can brainstorm together to find solutions. When this kind of data is presented to higher management, we are able to push for changes within our clinical settings. And I'm speaking from experience where for years I asked for certain things within emergency department when I used to work in Ghana. And then they would tell me there was no proof of it. Like I should prove that we needed these things. And I just didn't understand what they wanted me to do. But going forward, I now understand if you can have something, just a diagram to show them that, okay, this number of patients probably could have left the ED faster if we had A, B, C there. I think that that will go a long way to help us. My last contribution will be that people should please not look at the immediate benefits of research. I think I had a few opportunities in Ghana and I had always asked, okay, what is in it for me? No. Go on to some of these research opportunity or projects just for the purpose of learning. Just accept to be a research assistant, gather the data, write up a piece or list a problem that you think is within your area for like a researcher that is interested. Ask them, what can you do to help? How did they arrive at their conclusions or their data analysis? And that is how you are going to learn. And for me, I think that when we look at this from this direction, we will all develop at various times. And I think that that is going to help us a lot. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Those are such important comments that you made there. And you're absolutely right. There's something that I must go back and add onto my slides to make it very clear that by doing research, we are then able to provide the proof that people are asking us for. And you're right, the proof doesn't have to be doing a very complicated study for years and years. It can be something very simple and small that we are then able to take to our management and say, here is the proof that says it would be better to allow families into the emergency department, for example. And then people have a hard time saying no when you bring some proof to them in that way. So thank you for really highlighting that and the other points that you made. I absolutely agree. And I'm so glad that you are on your way to really embracing research and hopefully continuing on research for the rest of your career. There's so much work to be done in Africa for us all. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? James, you want to go ahead?
Thank you, Petra. It was such a great presentation. And creating the likeness and the love for research to come back. I'm speaking from Ghana. I just want to find out, when do you strike the difference between writing an article, doing a survey, or a research? Which of these, if somebody has research phobia, should start with or should commence with, and then gradually step it up into the complexity of bigger researches? Thank you.
Sure, thanks. Thanks for the question. So all of it would require some research, whether you're going to write an article or give a presentation. You know, there's always going to be a degree of research that you're doing. My advice to people who are starting research for the first time is I always say to them, just start with a simple descriptive survey, so that you can just start to understand the research process. And I always encourage people to put together a small sort of proposal so that they can see what the plan of their research is. And sometimes that's just 2 or 3 pages, 4 pages, so that it's just going to be like your recipe and guide you. And then I think once you obviously need to get ethical approval, because it depends on where you are and what kind of ethical approval you have to get. So once you have then done your research, I think that will also guide you as to what you're going to be able to do in terms of the dissemination, in terms of the, getting the results out. I always encourage and insist that you go back to the clinical area where you did the research and make sure that you give them feedback. So, and that can be done in many ways. Some people just go back and meet with the unit manager or whatever and tell them verbally. Some people go back with maybe like a short little report, and some people go back with an article that they've written. Knowing when you can publish depends a lot on which journal you're going to publish in and what that journal is going to be looking for. Generally speaking, you need to think about your ethics. People will not publish things if they don't have ethical approval for the research. If it's a quantitative study, if you did do a survey or something, the journals will often look at the sample size. So how many people did you have? And I always, so you always want to try and go as big as you can, but also keeping it manageable. And so those sort of things will really make you think about whether you would then be able to go further and publish the work. And I think if you're going to publish the work, or you're thinking you might like to publish the work, talk to somebody who knows and has published earlier rather than later. And then they might say to you, look, this is not really going to be something people are interested in, or you haven't followed all the research rules or whatever. You often need someone to look at it for you and guide you. The other thing I was going to say is it also depends on whether you're using a validated tool. Too often in nursing, we like to go and make our own tools, our own questionnaires. And then that becomes quite difficult to publish if you haven't followed all the rules and validated your own tool. So, so that would be probably my answer to that, James. I don't know if that answers what you were specifically asking.
Yes, please, it does.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Any other questions or comments? Please
Petra,
feel
could I
free.
just
Yes, go ahead.
could I just add that people should also target conferences. It mustn't be a big conference. So that was where I built a lot of confidence in presenting at university conferences, presenting at, and that was what gave me the confidence to actually present at the AFEM conference last year, and which has led to another conference I have booked in. So if like publishing is probably going to be a big tax for you, a daunting tax for you, I will target conferences within your region, within your country. Just go and test how credible whatever survey you've done is going to be accepted. If you are able to submit an abstract for a conference, you are a step closer to submitting a paper for publication. So I think that those, because you also usually get feedback from the conference, which will help you to improve whatever that you missed out on when you were doing your very simple descriptive survey or your narrative literature review or whatever that you presented at that conference. So I think that people can also start from very basic conferences.
No, again, absolutely, completely agree with you. And maybe to say that, you know, we've got AFChem coming up next year in Botswana, and maybe that could also be something, Emmanuel, that we could look at maybe having some kind of research workshop or research network group for nurses as something together with the conference, if there's interest in it. What do you think, Emmanuel?
I think that's a wonderful idea. We can just put that one in there and then find out how much information we can get from our members.
Sure. And maybe just to say that I'm putting my email in the chat. So if anybody has, you know, specific questions around research or looking for resources or whatever, you're very welcome to email me. I would just say, please don't send me numerous emails. Just send me one with what you're asking for, and then I will communicate with you. I'm very good about answering my emails. It might just take a little bit of time because I'm a bit busy at the moment, but you're very welcome to email me if you're looking for resources or for help. And I can maybe put you in contact with some other people, some other researchers, or maybe I can guide you towards some resources. Just to say that in many countries in Africa nowadays, there are lots of colleagues who are doing really important research in these various countries. And so sometimes you just might not be aware of who they are. So I think I am aware of quite a lot of them. And so I can maybe steer you in the right direction if that's something that you're needing. So please feel free to email me. Are there any other comments or questions before we finish for today?
I think that should be all, Petra. Thank you so much for the wonderful presentation. We're looking forward to our next presentation next month. Until then, wish you all well and then stay safe. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Emmanuel. Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye.